Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Medium's Porch. I am Kathleen Boldt. I am your host, and we are here again today to talk to LILYDALE mediums. These are the registered mediums in LILYDALE that have had the opportunity to go through a vetting and testing process and have been approved to work on the grounds of LILYDALE. LILYDALE being our spiritualist hamlet in Western New York. So without further ado, I'd like to get started and introduce you to today's guest. Our registered medium today is Reverend Joseph Herron. Hi, Joseph.
Hello, how are you today?
I am good, thank you. I'm so grateful that you could join me. I could tell the audience a little story about how when I was testing, you and I were paired up. You were to be one of my testing clients or sitters, and how things got confused, and it ended up we didn't get the message we were supposed to start, and then I didn't actually get to give you an offering, and then when you tested, I got paired with you. So it's interesting how that works, right? We were bound
to spirit is great. It's not always the plan that we come up with, but it is the way that it is supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah, it makes it fun to have those moments kind of lining up. I love it.
One of the things that I enjoy the most about being a medium, whether I am here in LILYDALE or whether I'm home in Louisville, Kentucky, is the fact that every day is totally different.
Yes.
It's never the same thing. And I'm not saying that I don't have challenging days. You know, I certainly have time periods where I may have mothers that have lost children and they kind of come in cycles or whatever, but it's always different to me. And the way that spirit directs itself to each one of the clients is different. Their own personality, their own viewpoint in life. You know, that's one of the things that's I don't believe is lost when we make our transition to the other side. We certainly have something that we experience called death, but it's more of a physical death. It really doesn't pertain to our personality, our soul, our driving force, our life. I think that those are all ongoing in our life. I am always thrilled to be here in LILYDALE. I'm thrilled to be a registered medium. I think it's a very special time for all of us. I think that the testing and the vetting process, we all want to pull our hair out, right? And like you said before, we met because we were paired up for me to be your sitter while you were finishing up your testing process. And then a very short period of time, I think it was just a year or so later, Spirit drove us back together again.
I know. And I had, you know, we try to make sure that there's no crossover in terms of us knowing each other, right? The authenticity of being able to give somebody a reading you don't know anything about. Well, we never really got to know each other that well, nor did we meet our spirit loved ones because I didn't end up reading you that day. So I had to check in though, because I did check. I'm like, am I allowed to sit with him? And is he allowed to give me a reading? Everything was fine because we hadn't gotten to know one another.
But you know, and you've experienced this, I'm sure yourself, is I have no memory. So the reading that I had with you, I could not tell you the first person or the first thought that they had, because, you know, when we are in the service of spirit, it's not us anymore. Right. It's just kind of coming through us. So we don't retain the memories because it wasn't our experience.
Right. Can you imagine if we did, though, that the thousands of people that we read?
I think when I was first starting to do this, you know, and I am what's considered a born medium. So since I was 3 or 4 years old, I woke up or went to bed almost every night with a very crowded room. And I don't think that my Catholic parents understood the concept. And so my mom would spend a lot of time with me until I went to sleep at night. And my father was very old-fashioned, very much a man's man. And he, at times when he was home, he would make me sleep in my room, and he would make my mom separate and sleep in her room. And she would yell and scream and cry, and I would yell and scream and cry. And he would even
put a lot of activity
through the doors, you know, because he wanted me to be a grown-up. The problem was I was only 3 or 4, and I didn't know who those people were in my room, which going forward, my father passed away about 2.5 years ago. He was very thrilled when I became ordained. And there's a whole story around that, but I won't bore anybody with that. But he said, what should I call you now? Do I call you Reverend? Do I call you, what do I call you? And I said, it's always been my honor for you to call me son. That's what I went. That's really what I wanted more from my father. But when he was on his deathbed, I was there watching him, and everybody else went to the store. And he looked at me and he said, "Who are all the people in this room?"
No.
And I kind of like took a breath, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, since it was an emotional time for me, my mediumship wasn't on. You know how we have times in our life that we have to kind of like do the living, right?
Yeah.
So he's in his transition, which makes me emotional. So although I could see spirits in the mirror, because there was a mirror, I had him in the front living room, and I had a mirror in the kitchen in my parents' house where I was making his food. I could still look into the mirror and see him, and I could see spirit in shadow form kind of walking past the mirror, but I couldn't zoom in on what they actually looked like at that point. So when he said, "Who are all the people that's in the room with me?" I said, "I don't know. I can't see them right now because I'm going through an emotional part in my life." But I said, "I'm very interested in you telling me who they are, because they're here to support you. They're not ever here to take us. They're here so that we can make our transition and always be with someone." In my point of view.
Sure. No, I love that. Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is, I wanted to say, I told you that they were here. Just
Yeah.
because you couldn't see them didn't mean that they weren't always here.
Did he end up telling you who they were?
He did not.
Okay.
He did not, because I think that it settled him down. I don't think my father was afraid of death. He was afraid of what he might have to go through to get there.
I see. And that's kind of
And I
logical.
think that it comforted him that they weren't there to take him, or he wasn't going through that transition alone.
Right.
But he had people on this side and he had people on the other side.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider my father an overly religious man. His mother was. I never got to meet her. She was gone before I was born. But I had come to understand religion from not only growing up Catholic, but my mom used to make fun of me because I visited every church, every faith. I wanted to find my own connections. When I went to high school, I went to a Catholic high school. And the interesting thing about being in an all boys Catholic high school is not only the discipline, but we had a chapel actually physically inside the school. So they would have masses every day that you didn't have to go to. They were held before school. And I found that during my lunch period, at a time that was very, when you're a teenager, especially when you're in your freshman year, you're trying to get a feel for yourself.
Yes.
You're trying to get a feel for how you're fitting in. And for me, I just wanted to be normal. Well, this is when my mediumship, I really started to understand what I was seeing, what I was experiencing. And I can honestly say it did not make me happy, because I just wanted to be normal. I had been anything but normal through a majority of my life. And when I started to go to this new school, this new high school, I was angry at God because I didn't understand the plan. I felt like God was putting something else on my plate, and I'm like, no, 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 that's not going to make me normal. I just want to kind of blend in and have friends and be normal. So I would sneak off, because we weren't allowed to be anywhere but the cafeteria. But I would sneak off during my lunch break And I would find myself alone in this chapel. And now that I'm an ordained minister and I tell the story, I think that people think that I had some type of uh, connection with God from a very early age, which I did.
Sure.
It didn't mean that I understood it. It didn't mean that I still wasn't mad. So I'm telling you that because I spent my 20 or 30 minutes on lunch period cussing God out
Oh,
loud in a church.
oh,
Okay. And I think that if somebody would have found me, they would have probably thought that I was either crazy, right, or blasphemous in
right.
some ways. And it really goes along with my view of spiritualism now, or being a spiritualist now, because I always had a strong belief in God. That wasn't the problem. The problem was is I had to relinquish what I thought was my control over my own life,
Yes.
and to understand that there was a bigger purpose, that there was a bigger plan. And although I am but a small piece of dust in the greater scheme, I'm an important piece, as is everybody.
And we can make the mistakes, and God has that higher plan, has that, is okay if we have expectations and learn out that that's not really helpful. Yeah,
When
we don't
I
my
when
light. Mhm.
It is. When I was very young, probably 12, 11 years old, and back then, I think that we had like 4 channels on the TV long before cable, right? And I was flipping the dials. I think it was on a Sunday and it was mostly sports stuff. And I flipped around and it was like 10 scariest places or 10 most unusual places in the world, I think it was. And what did they highlight? They highlighted LILYDALE.
No way.
Okay.
Wow.
And I don't know anything about LILYDALE. I really didn't know anything about mediumship at that point, but something told me that this is where I belonged. Something was leading me back, not to visit LILYDALE for the first time, but to live my life and then come back to where I started. So I believe that for whatever reason, my soul has been here before. And
Oh,
so they said, go out, live your life, do all these different things, but then in the end, you will circle around and come back into LILYDALE. The only thing I remembered from this television show was the name. And I locked it into my head and I thought Lily like the flower,
yeah.
and Dale like the area or the neighbors. Okay. And I thought, LILYDALE, one day I'll visit LILYDALE. And I thought it was going to be around when I was in my 20s, because back then, 30 or 40 seemed old to me.
Sure.
Um, and it wasn't until I walked through the gates of LILYDALE the very first time, many years ago, over 20 years ago, um, I was home.
Uh,
I was home and I started to make that awareness. I had turned away from all organized religion because nothing ever felt exactly right. I could pick and choose of I like this about Catholics, I like this about Judaism, I like this about, this particular religion, but nothing seemed to be open enough or fit me like a glove.
right.
So when I came up here to LILYDALE, I came up here with several other people. I was a medium at the time, um, but I had never been formally taught. And I found myself in LILYDALE, and they kept talking about a service, which we would now know as the Healing Temple. But what
Oh,
most
okay.
people don't know is when we're off season, right? It's one of our many churches, one of our many spiritualist churches here. And I told my friends that I was going to go to a service. I didn't tell them what type of service. I was a little bit embarrassed of it. And I said, I'm being told that I need to attend this service tomorrow. And they were like, isn't tomorrow Sunday? Is it a religious service? And I didn't want to admit to it because I kind of turned away from organized religion. And I said, you don't have to go, but something in me is telling me that I need to go. I don't know for what purpose or where that's going to lead me, but I feel like I need to go. So me and my now husband, Craig, went up to the Healing Temple off season. And when we left that day, I found my place.
Yeah.
And I can't say it any more than that, because if you've never been to a spiritualist church, it's not an indoctrination. We don't say you have to come here every week. You have to bring your whole family. There's no other way of life other than my own. For me, and I'm not a member of that specific spiritualist church, but of a different spiritualist church here in LILYDALE, it's a God of your own understanding, the God based upon your experiences in life, not what somebody else has experienced or went through or thinks it's important for you to understand, but your own connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what draws me back here. I have an assistant, and she lives in Louisville, Kentucky. So most of my clients get to meet her while she's setting up their appointment and when they show up. But every time I come to LILYDALE, she only asks me one question: are you coming back?
Oh, back to Louisville.
Back to Louisville, because she knows that when I'm here, I'm comfortable.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I love all my clients, but I'm the oddity. I'm the oddity when I'm there. People travel long distances to come and see me work as a medium.
And is that how you got the title Louisville Medium? Because
It
you
is.
are one of
It
the
is.
only
It was
people
part
doing
of it was part of my guy that did my marketing and brand. He branded me as Louisville's medium because
Okay.
he thought that that would make more sense to people.
Huh?
When he was designing my first website, I wanted him to work with me because he'd worked for some really big companies. He had never worked for anything so strange as spiritualism or doing mediumship. And he said, no problem, because he watched me in action. And he said, I can't say that I believe in the concept, but I do believe in you.
Nice.
And I said, I want people to understand that although at first thought, when we think about talking to the other side or we think about talking to the dead, some people think that's really odd. I think it's completely normal. And when somebody approaches me and they say, what do you do for a living? Depending on my mood and my shock value at the time, I might say, I talk to the dead, just to kind of get that reaction, right? Um, but I believe that it's completely normal. I believe it's completely natural. When we're young and we may not have lost anybody close to us, we might think about things that go bump in the night. But when we've lost our mother or our father or our sister, or our brothers, our friends, our grandparents, or whatever, they're still the same people on the other side. They still care about us. They still connect to us in a very personal way.
Mm-hmm.
So no readings should ever be the same. I've had times where I've read for whole families, but they wanted individual readings. So I might read for 4 hours, right? Person by person by person. They don't want to do it in a group. And I think, oh my gosh, am I going to say the same thing about the same people over and over and over again? It never happens. And it doesn't happen not because that person on the other side it has 12,000 different personalities, but the way that they relate to your sitter is what needs to come through in a reading. So it might be two sisters, right?
Sure.
But their relationship, their personal relationship with their mother on the other side, she's going to reach out to one daughter differently than she reaches out to the other daughter, at least from my experience. What has your experience been?
Absolutely the same. And I make a rule, because sometimes when we're doing those kind of one after another reading in the family, it's the same people that are in the space with you, the essence of the same spirits, the same people. And when the person comes in, I always had to say, we start from scratch. You give me different evidence so that I know I'm not getting in the way, because I know you're still here, but they didn't. So let's start from scratch. And then we get a whole new ball game going, right? We get a
It's
whole
part of our healthy boundary.
Yeah, exactly. And therefore
Definitely.
provide that custom experience and give that spirit the opportunity. Like you said, I love that you said it that way, that you give the sitter the opportunity to experience mom, say for instance, as she remembers them, as she remembers mom, right?
And that's important to their relationship, their personal relationship. Doesn't mean that mom loves one person more than the other. It means that they have a different relationship. They have an individual relationship. That family that I was just speaking of, that it was one person after the next. The last person I read was a young man. I don't even remember how old he was. If he was 13, 14, 15, 16. And he came back there, and my office door in Louisville, I have several different rooms. And so my reading room goes into my assistant's room. And then on the other side of that is a waiting room. There's no door on my office because sometimes I may have younger clients say, I'll have a grandmother that the granddaughter said, I want to go and get a reading for my birthday. And they may be 16 years old. As long as I have permission from her mother or her grandmother, but I want them to have the privacy of having a one-on-one reading. But I want them to feel safe, and I want that family member to be able to put eyes on them all the time, but maybe not be able to hear what we're discussing. So I have it in my office set up where the grandmother or the mother may be able to see them from 2 rooms away, but they can't hear the conversation. And that way, that person gets that privacy they need, and they can take what they need from that reading.
And then the grandmother or parent that's watching can watch the body language and have the comfort of knowing everything's okay.
Yes, yes, very much so. I, as I said before, grew up Roman Catholic, and I met someone in Casadega, Florida, that kind of outed me to my husband, because when I first met my husband, I wanted to be normal again, right? I didn't want to start off by saying I'm a medium.
Right.
So
away, right?
over the years, he knew without me telling him. And when I went and had an appointment in Casadega, Florida, she said, I don't normally see 2 people at a time. She said, I don't know what's going to come up in your reading. So I want to make sure that you are okay with somebody else sitting in on your reading. We weren't married at the time, but we had been together for several years. And I said, sure, I'm thinking, what is she going to tell me, So she said, oh my gosh. She closed her eyes and she said, you have all these different colors around you. She said, it's black, but not black as in dark. Black as in a mixture of all colors. And she said, you're a great medium. These are the things that you're going to do. So the whole time I'm like looking over at him like, what's he going to think about what she's saying?
Thinking it was his first time hearing it, right?
Yeah. He said, I knew. He said, but I needed you to tell me, or I needed the other person to put it into words. And I appreciated that. But Craig has been my driving force at me becoming Louisville Medium, because he sat down and he said, you're doing this on nights and you're doing this on weekends, and why aren't you doing this all the time? I said, how would that work? Have to have a money, have to have a job, have to have money, have to have insurance, have to have all these different things. And he said, I got this. I got this. Do what you want to do. The money will follow. The money will come. And it did.
Together to make it happen. Yeah.
But I had the security that a lot of other mediums don't have. When they're going out on their own, we have to have our normal job. And then we do this. I had the opportunity to make that leap of faith and know that I was going to be financially okay. And I said to him, it's different. It's different me just seeing people out and saying, I'm touched by spirit for this person, or I'm touched by spirit to this person, versus a complete stranger coming to me for a paid reading where you're going to be like, I'm like, what happens if I can't make a connection? What happens if I'm not connecting to their people? I can honestly say that I don't think that that's ever happened to me. That doesn't mean that I've never had a bad reading. It, sometimes I'm not in the right space. Sometimes that sitter is not in the right space. Maybe I'm not the right reader for them
Right.
on that particular day. But this person that in Casanova, Florida, her name is Mary Hayes. She still practices. She's a channeler. Fabulous if you ever get a chance to meet her. But she said there was a series at that time. I think it was just one book, but there was one or two books by Reverend Janet Nohavec.
Okay, yes.
And I was just like, I didn't really think much of it. I went home and she said, I would like to talk to you every couple of months because she said, I don't get to talk to another medium. I don't
Okay.
get to talk about shared experiences, because lay people, not that they are not curious or understand, but sometimes we don't want to explain everything to them. We just want to talk to another medium about our experience. And I said, that would be great. And so one of the times that I talked to her, I said, what was that lady's name? The one that used to be a Catholic nun that's now a medium? And she said, Janet Nohavec. And she said, she has a 2-year waiting list.
Yes.
2 years to go to sign up to go and see her. Out of all the years, and me and Janet became close friends, I never got a reading. Never got a reading. But I worked with her professionally, right? I brought her to Louisville. I was thrilled as my mentor came to Louisville. But we had our Catholic understanding.
Yes, you would. Mm-hmm.
In common, and I think that that made us very close. But she was one of the original people that inspired me to come to LILYDALE.
Nice.
um, I
Nice.
looked her up. I'd read her books. I highly recommend her books, but her first book, Through the Darkness, was more about her life challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I can take from Janet is she said the Catholic Church had no problem when I was talking to Jesus and talking to the angels and talking to the saints. But the moment that I mentioned grandmother and talking to my dead grandmother, that was a bridge too far. And she literally said, I don't understand. I don't understand. Why is it any different from me
Sure.
talking to God or talking to Jesus or talking to the angels or the saints than talking to my loved grandmother?
Yeah.
And so we always kind of laughed about that. But I looked her up, and she was teaching a class on mediumship. I had never taken the first class on mediumship. Now, I was a professional medium, but I was self-taught, self-learned, right? So I just got online and I thought, I'm taking this class for no other reason than I'm going to meet this woman, right? This medium that I had read all her life story. So I signed up for the class. Then I'm reading the small print. LILYDALE, so no refunds. And in her class description, it said, this is not for beginners. This is an intermediate class, and I grew up with old Catholic nuns that were, how should I put it, very strict, very strict. So I thought, do I want to risk going in front of an old Catholic nun that I'm supposed to know certain things that I'm not sure that I know because I never had any kind of formal training? But what I can tell you is when I went there that day, and I still remember it like it was yesterday, it happened to be at the top of our hill in our Lyceum building.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a beautiful field in the back.
Yes.
And it was a beautiful morning, and she had the back door open, and I could see the grass, and I could see the trees off. I could feel the morning light. I could hear the birds singing. And I again thought, this is me. I feel like this is awakened part of me, and everything else had kind of led up to this point. But again, I was nervous because not only she was somebody that I had only read about or saw, had never met personally. But I thought, she said, this is not for beginners. And that scared me.
Mm-hmm.
She did not teach me how to read. She taught me the vocabulary. She taught me the meaning of being an evidential medium.
Right.
Even though we can form different ways of doing our mediumship, evidential mediumship is what has meant the most to me in my life and what means a lot to my clients. So instead of just saying, I have your mother or I have your brother or I have your child with me, that there's some type of proof. There's some type of proof of who they are and their relationship to them. Sometimes the proof is in describing what the person may have looked at. Other readings, I may never know what that person looks like because they're talking to me, or they're sharing a memory with me, or they're sharing some kind of connection, and I don't know what they look like on the outside, right? I think that Janet always referred to it as painting the person back to life.
I love that statement she used. Yes.
So that those words that we use, we ask spirit to direct us and to let our voice and to let our mind bring that person, paint that person back to life for our sitter. And we do that through our evidence, through the facts. And they're different for every single person that comes in. I think that some people think, I'm going to go in there and I've already told my loved one on the other side they need to say this, this, and this. Well, that's your agenda. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes I end up saying exactly what they wanted that loved one to say, but we're all independent. Sometimes their loved one wants to say something about what was important in their life that maybe that person, that sitter in front of you, didn't know that was one of the most important things in that person's life.
And then you have the opportunity to get to know them better then.
You do. You do. When Janet passed away, and Janet did pass away about a year and a half or so ago, I was dumbfounded. I was floored. One of her last acts was she wrote me a letter of reference for being tested as a registered medium here in LILYDALE.
Oh, fabulous.
And I was so thrilled by it because she said he is going to be an asset to mediumship in LILYDALE.
Nice.
That's high praise from Janet Nohavec. If you ever get a chance to watch any of her past readings on Zoom, you'll understand that Janet gives you point after point after point after point after point about somebody. She doesn't just say, I have your mom and she was short. It has to be a whole series. And when you're in front of her, there was a time that I was training with Janet and John Holland. If some of you all are familiar with who John Holland is, we were on the altar. We were on the platform. They were sitting in the back of the room, right? Two big mentors, two big mediums, and they've got their little notepads, and they've got you've got a camera faced on you that's recording you. They're sitting in the back, going to give you criteria, critiques of what you're doing good or what. There's nothing more nerve-wracking than that until I took the test in LILYDALE.
Yes. It's a wonderful experience if you've experienced Janet. Absolutely. I didn't even realize how much Janet was influencing my work. She certainly was a catalyst. She brought in Colin Bates and Mavis Patilla, people that I adored and studied with and mentored with. But she did that for me, but I didn't recognize, even though I've had classes with her, I didn't have that connection that you had with that Catholicism and such. I did have a private reading with her, spiritual assessment at one point. So, she got to know me better and vice versa. But powerful influence to individuals. Like I said, I didn't even realize what an influence she actually played in my mediumship until I reflected back on it. And I too was shocked. I too was quite surprised and disappointed, but I mean, it's out of my control, and very happy that she's still working with us. She's shown up in readings even that I've had. It's amazing.
Completely still working with me. I mentioned to you that I went to Arthur Findlay College last year.
Yes.
Janet Nohavec was a tutor at Arthur Findlay, right? And some of the funny things that happened was I'm in this class, first time at Arthur Findlay College, and I know that they have a memorial bench for Janet. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to find the bench. So I went out there and I sat. It's bittersweet because I wanted to do all these things when Janet was here. And I'm sorry that I didn't allow myself to do those. But I wanted to sit on Janet's bench. And I took this class, and they do what you just mentioned, spiritual assessments. And so I signed up for a spiritual assessment, and I went in there and I started to tell her how I was kind of led on this journey of my life through Janet. What I didn't know was this is one of Janet's best friends sitting in front of me across the desk. Okay. Nice. And she said, "You do know that I know Janet. I knew Janet very well." And I said, "No, I had no idea." So we kind of laughed about that. In my class, there were several people that had known Janet, and right outside the classroom door was like a little memorial table, and it had a picture of Janet, and it had some other things and other pictures. And then there was a curio cabinet that had glass shelves in it. And on one of the glass shelves at the very bottom, right before we left, we noticed a pair of red sequin shoes. Okay. And so I walked back into the classroom. This was the very last day. And I said, "What's the significance for those red sequin shoes?" There's always reminded me of like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, right? Just red, right sequin shoes. And my friend and me were laughing because she said, "They must be Janet's," because Janet wore like old nun shoes. They were very plain. They were very just like what you imagine that an old nun would wear, right? Very practical shoes or whatever. But you know what? Those shoes were Janet's. So I think that people saw Janet sometimes in one way, but there was a spark in her.
So if you read her book, that'll come through clearly.
My friend that still teaches based upon Janet's book said the first time that I brought Janet to Louisville and she met her, she said, "Who knew how hysterically funny she was?" Because you don't often get it from the book, right? You're thinking about, she said, "Do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way." But she had such a spark for life. When she came to Louisville and we would drive around, we spent a whole afternoon at the cemetery, not because it was depressing, but because it's what we lived for. It was to remember the people and all the people that are going to visit those people, that have lost those people. I'm often struck by the fact that if you ever come to LILYDALE, one of the world's oldest and largest pet cemeteries, right? Just like Stephen King wrote about when he wrote about Pet Cemetery, but very, very much his own twist to it. We bury our own out in the woods, right? I don't often go and visit the pet cemetery, not because I am thinking that the pets are sad that they're passed, but the people that go to visit their past pets have such an emotional response. Sometimes it's more of an emotional response than they had to people in their lives. And that part sometimes pulls me down. You understand? I know that pets are lapping and playing in fields, but sometimes the loss of somebody or a pet is so significant in our life.
And so you bring through pets in your readings then for people, correct?
Yes, yes. Not very often. The last time I can think about, I was doing a reading here in LILYDALE with one of the other registered mediums, Chris Seastead. There was a group of people in the room. And I said, "I know I'm from Kentucky, so this may sound normal, but I'm telling you it's not." I said, "I see a small horse." I said, this is not a colt. This is not a young horse. I said, this is a full grown horse, but it's only this tall. And the family just starts buckets of tears, you know. They were like, that was our blah, 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 whatever the name of the horse was, right? So sometimes pets can have a very much emotional response to us. And they look.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to close out about Janet for our listeners. I'll put the book that we referenced and information about Janet in our links as well. Is that okay?
Yeah, because Janet, you know, had the two main books, Through the Darkness.
Yeah.
Her first one, her life story, but the second book is more about mediumship. And so I always tell everybody, if you want to practice your mediumship, the second book gets a lot of details on that.
Now you are also teaching a class this summer, so some of Janet's influence will be on your shoulder.
Definitely. A majority of Janet's. And I did ask her before she passed if I was able to teach in her style, and she did grant that to me. My first one is on July 19th. Both of the classes are 2 to 5 in the afternoon, back-to-back classes. The first one's going to deal with individual readings, and the second class deals with platform mediumship. And if you're not familiar with platform mediumship, that's okay, because we'll have all kinds of different skill sets, beginners and more advanced people in the class. But it's given you the opportunity to practice in front of other people.
Perfect.
It's a different way of doing it. You know, we could get much more personal in an individual reading, but some people don't feel comfortable doing an individual reading. They want to kind of hide out in a group. And so you have to kind of, as a LILYDALE medium anyway, we have to learn how to do both very well.
Correct.
And so I tell people, you know, even when you take the test here to be a registered medium, don't feel bad. Don't think that you're not a medium if you don't pass the test.
Right, exactly.
It just means that you're not up to doing it in the LILYDALE style or in the LILYDALE way, or being able to switch back and forth between doing individual reading and doing what we refer to as platform readings.
And we are very intensely engaged during those 75 days of season.
Oh my gosh.
So we have to have the endurance to do not only both methods of delivery for spirit, we also have to have the endurance to get through the bookings, to get through the volunteer work that we're required to do, doing outdoor services, that's all voluntary. And then contributing our time in other ways, like teaching or doing all message services and this type of thing. So it's quite the vetting is a very purposeful exercise for us to go through to get the qualifications. And I just add in here too, that when you come to LILYDALE, a suggestion is to book your medium in advance. So get on their website, get on your website there, Joseph, get on Joseph's website to make sure you can get in. Yeah.
I tell every person that I talk to about LILYDALE, do two things. I said, I don't care where you're going to stay. I do have a guest house here.
That's right. We have to mention that.
And I'm partial to it myself, Southern Comfort Inn. But it doesn't matter where you stay, but it is important that you don't just show up. Because you may not be able to stay inside of the lovely LILYDALE and experience it. And I really do think, and I've said this long before I ever had a house here in LILYDALE, I think it's important to be on the grounds of LILYDALE for several days. Don't treat it like we do Disneyland or Kings Island or some other kind of resort where you're just like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to see everything, take pictures of everything. You have to experience it. You have to be here. You have to breathe the air. You have to feel spirit. This is a beautiful community, and a lot of people don't understand that we're actually on an island here. We have a beautiful Lake Cassadaga in front of us. We have water all the way around, and we have an aquifer that runs underneath LILYDALE. There's something special about the land, and there's something special about the water. And you don't know until you get here. After you've been here for a few days, and it comes time for you to walk out of the gates of LILYDALE, you're going to feel a shift. You're going to feel a change. I always describe it as being part of a warm hug when you're inside of LILYDALE. Does it make all your problems go away? No. Do you start to understand your connection and that you are not alone? And this is just another way of alleviating some of the problems that you, or understanding some of the problems in your life. This is the place to do it. But LILYDALE is not a place that we can describe to other people because it's about your own experience. Not everybody, and they probably will dislike me saying this, but not everybody comes for a reading, or not everybody needs a reading. Sometimes what you experience here on the grounds of LILYDALE is getting something to eat and maybe sitting by the lake. Maybe going with your friend on one of the walking tours or going on one of the paths out. It's not always attending the churches here or attending the readings here or any of the workshops or classes. These are all wonderful. Don't pre-plan your whole trip if you've never been here. Let some things happen organically. I've got just as much out of the classes here as I got through just sitting at the coffee house. Brand new coffee house that opened up last year. It's in the same place that other coffee houses were, but you will meet people from all over the world and nothing happens by chance.
Yeah, and you also need that time if you go in for a reading, you need that time to metabolize, because a lot of people do leave our readings feeling emotionally expressive or being challenged, even sometimes, not challenged in a negative way, but challenged to see the world differently through the surprise and the nourishment of spirit. So you want to be able to give yourself time and space for that. Even if you come as a group too, also set your boundaries with your group members and give yourself that space. I concur with what you're saying, Joseph. You know, you want to have an approach to this where you get the things in scheduled that you want to, and you leave yourself time to just be.
I have a really funny shorter story about one of our mediums that passed away this past year, Anne Gaiman. We always called her the Pink Lady. For those of you all that have seen the No One Dies in LILYDALE documentary, she is the Pink Lady, lived in a pink house, wore pink clothes. She even painted like the floors in her house pink. I had never had the chance at that point to meet Anne one-on-one. And I was up here with my assistant and some other people, and we were walking through LILYDALE, and my assistant had just bought a pink LILYDALE sweatshirt. It was a little bit cool that morning. We were walking down the street, and season had just started. And she said, "Ooh, get me a picture of me sitting in front of Anne Gaiman's house," right? So I'm like, okay. So I'm like setting up the camera, you know, and to take her picture. And I see Anne, or who I think is Anne, walking out on her front porch, and she kind of has shears down, so I couldn't get a good picture or whatever. And I'm like telling my friend, I'm like, get off the porch, get off the porch. Here she comes, get off the porch. You know? And so just as I go to take, she goes, just take the picture, just take the picture. She don't know what I'm saying. So just as I go to take the picture, Anne pulls back the curtain and photobombs the picture.
No.
Hysterically, yes. So then she opens up the door and she says, what are your names? And my assistant said her name, and I said Joseph, and she said, Joseph. She said, I was meditating this morning with one of my granddaughters, and she said, I heard the name Joseph mentioned to me 3 times. So she said, I don't know why yet, but we're supposed to have met. She said, I just came back from Washington, D.C. from my other house. And she said, if you would like to come over tomorrow for tea at whatever time she picked, I don't know, like 2 o'clock or whatever, she said, I would like to invite you all over for tea tomorrow. And I said, yes, ma'am, you know, this, that, and the other. Now, you have to understand that I came up to LILYDALE. I would take class after class after class after class, no refunds, right? So I knew I was supposed to be in class the next day. So did I go to class, or did I go to I went to
Of course
Ann's.
you did. Good.
So sometimes I think it's important that you tell people that even though you think you know why you're coming to Lilydale,
Mhm.
some things happen by spirit that are much more organic in who you meet. Don't pass those things by while you're trying to learn because they're there for a reason. I don't know if you can see them, but um, the china cabinet that's in the background back here,
Yeah, we
that's
have.
that's Ann Gaiman's china cabinet. And most
Oh,
of the possessions inside of it are Ann Gaiman. And if you come to Southern Comfort, you're going to see my big long table. That's also Ann Gaiman. Because
nice.
when I bought those from her property, I wanted to have a little bit of her, but I wanted her things to stay in Lilydale.
Nice. Yeah.
There's some wonderful, wonderful healers, wonderful registered mediums in Lilydale. You don't know what to expect, but everything is for the betterment of you.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't know what that is going to mean for us as an individual, and there's no way that we can describe what Lilydale is going to mean to you. What I can tell you is most people, it changes their life. And most people are always drawn back at some time to Lilydale.
Once you've been here, exactly. Yeah.
We
So,
have guests that come every year, but we have guests that say, I haven't been here in 10 years or 20 years, but they come back.
so Joseph will be doing auditorium mediumship on the 28th of June, also on July 13th. And he'll also be doing an all message service that gives him a full hour with our audience in the auditorium. You can purchase tickets for $10, go and listen to him. He'll deliver messages to the crowd. He'll also be showing up at the outdoor services throughout the summer at his leisure and what's appropriate for his schedule. And if you want to get a hold of him, Joseph, how do they get a hold of you to make your appointments?
So you can either call 502 718 0761 is my number. You can call my assistant at 502. I don't know. I will have to post that on there. I can't even think of my own business because I never call. I never call
Right. Well,
it.
in the catalog,
In
your
the catalog.
information's in
There's
there.
also
So
my phone number. You can also get on my website, which is LouisvilleMedium.com. And you can email me or schedule through that website through my assistant.
now, do we call the same number if we want to book something at your guest house?
You can. My assistant does both. You should also know to when you book at Southern Comfort Inn, we are a true 24/7 reservations. So you can just get up online at southerncomfortinn.com and you make your own reservation. So you can do it in the middle of the night or whatever time your busy schedule allows.
And Southern Comfort is at 9 Cleveland Avenue. It's the big, beautiful house on the corner, and it's got beautiful flowers, especially in spring. I loved all your tulips last year. And angels, a lot of angels in the front.
And the surprise is that we have a 6 foot, 1,000 pound cat on
Oh,
the
yeah,
side
that's
of
right,
the
right around the
house.
corner. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So everybody, there's lots to see and lots to experience in Lilydale from the outside and from the inside. I'm always thinking of the guest house right next to me, Kratsley's. She's also Ellie is also a fabulous medium.
Absolutely.
They had one of Ellie's favorite trees that had to come down in front of their house last year, and she is such a visionary that they built a little gnome house out of the remnants of the tree. Because I was really worried because I know how Ellie is attached to her trees.
Yes.
And we had to take down several trees the other year in Lilydale, and it really kind of upset a lot of people. And I asked Ellie, I said, are you devastated? Are you? And she said, no. She said it served a purpose and it will continue to send a purpose. And
Yeah.
so they built this cutest little gnome house. And so if you ever go, the little front door and the back door open. and you can see the stuff that's inside. They made their own stained glass windows for the gnome house, and at night it all lights up. It's really something to see.
Yeah, it's a very special corner there with all the beauty and the fantasy and the symbolism and the flowers and the hummingbirds.
And we're right across the street from the Maplewood Hotel, which is kind of a central gathering place, much like the coffee house is right down the street.
The lake from the hotel and from your porch as well. And then you've got the indigenous circle there, the First Nations geometry circle. Boy, my language is bad right now. It's just a circle you can go and meditate on the stumps that are set up there. Yeah, it's a beautiful corner of
this house. This house was one of the only original large houses in Lilydale. Most people don't understand that these are little bitty cottages. And although we've added on to them in all different ways over the years, they were built as small houses or small cottages. My house was originally a large house because they had several businesses, palm reading, chiropractic. It was a bookstore, all of everything all at once here.
Yeah, historians, people that are interested in history, Lilydale is a great place to come because there's so much. We've got a museum, there's little signposts around the property. Yeah.
And we were honored enough to have a historical sign put up last year at the ways that Lilydale was instrumental in the women's rights movement. And so it kind of gives you the history of that. I always recommend what they call the ghost tour here on Wednesdays, because it's not really a ghost tour, it's a history class. And so you get to walk through Lilydale and go through even the museums and stuff that at night are closed. They will walk you through them all, and they will end up at the stump, and they will give you the stories of the history of Lilydale. It's always a good time.
Information about Lilydale is online, www.lilydaleassembly.org. You can also pick up a copy of this as you, I don't know if they're giving them out at the gates. Are you familiar when you arrive and you pay your entrance fee of $15?
They will have the programs at the gate. Yeah.
Okay,
this year is the first year that we didn't just send out the programs because it's getting too costly to send them out. But yes, they are available.
Yeah, and lots of information in there. Good to have as a memento as well. All right, my friend, I am so glad you were able to join me today. You've shared a wealth of information for people and also about yourself. Listeners, thank you for joining Joseph and I today, and hope to see you again in a week when we have someone new on the show. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.